In Romania, we have a tough public debate on the unitary public pay law. The government says that nobody will get smaller salaries. The union says the opposite. And there are a lot of voices saying that the IMF is guilty for this law and for all the bad measures. So I suppose it's time for the Romanian employees to find out from the most authorized source how many of them will be fired and how much will decrease their salaries according to the standby agreement between Romania and IMF.
There's something that the Romanian people have to understand. The IMF comes like a doctor. And if you need a doctor, it's because you have some disease. In our situation, the doctor brings some medicine, which is money, and we tell you that you have to correct the disease. Correcting the disease in your case was mostly correcting the deficit. But we don't choose the measure. The government has to choose it. And the government decides what kind of measure he's going to take. Increasing taxes, decreasing some expenditures, rather this kind of expenditures, other kind of expenditures. The IMF never says you're going to fire X thousand or hundred of people. Never. That's not our job. Our job is to say, what we see with your economy is that you need to go back with this speed to a more balanced budget. And then the government proposed measures which says, well, we believe that this measure are effective enough, or we don't believe this, but we don't choose the measure. So I understand, because it's the game all around the world, that when the ministers then have to go to TV and say we have to take measures, they say, oh, that's those guys on the IMF, it's their fault. We know this. That's the kind of scapegoat we used to be. But the reality is not this one. Of course, we are tough in saying, look, you cannot have more deficit than this or that. That's true. But then the way to correct it is the government choice.
In Latvia, at the end of the last year, the Constitutional Court has rejected a measure for diminishing the public pensions. In Romania, the unitary law of the public pensions has big chances also to be rejected by the Constitutional Court. Which are the risks that an eventual failure of the pensions reform would affect the standby agreement with IMF?
That's a very good example, which directly related to what we said before. If something which is proposed by the government doesn't work for domestic laws and constitutional courts saying you can do that, we say, okay, but then you have to find something else. We're not deciding ourselves what kind of measures are necessary. And if the government happens, that the government, as it happened in Latvia, you're perfectly right, decided to do something on pension, and finally for domestic law it's unable to do it, we say fine, but then find something else, increase taxes. In Latvia, for instance, they don't have any kind of progressive income tax. They have a flat income tax. In almost all other European countries, you have a progressive income tax. So we say, why don't you increase the income tax, especially for higher income? It will be a way to compensate for the loss of the measure you're not able to implement, which is the cut in pension. And maybe socially, it will have better results.